Before the Turks, before the Ottomans, before even the name Anatolia echoed through history, this land held stories not written in ink, but in blood. Beneath every stone in modern-day Turkey, there lie echoes of ancient migrations, long-forgotten civilizations, and genetic memories still breathing in the people who walk these lands today. Anatolia, the cradle between continents, has never belonged to one people alone. For over 10,000 years, it was not a border, it was a bridge walked by Hattans, whose whispers faded into the dust long before writing, by Hittites, who carved empires from mountain fortresses, by Phrygians, Greeks, Armenians, and Romans, each leaving their footprints in the soil, and more importantly, in the genes. The most ancient layers of Turkish DNA are older than the Turks themselves. Long before any Turkic word was ever spoken here, this land was home to the earliest farmers on earth, the Anatolian Neolithic cultures, who planted the first seeds of agriculture. Their legacy isn't just archaeological, it's biological. From the remains of Kumtepe and Bonkuklu, ancient DNA tells us that these early Anatolians contributed their genes not only to the people of this land, but also to the very foundation of European ancestry. When early farmers migrated from Anatolia into Europe, they brought with them more than wheat and livestock. They brought a genetic signature, one that still pulses in the veins of Southern Europeans today. Sardinians, Tuscans, Greeks, all carry echoes of Anatolia's first cultivators. And yet, the story doesn't stop with Neolithic farmers. With each passing era, Anatolia became a magnet for waves of migration. Indo-European speakers from the steppe, Achaemenid Persians marching from the east, Macedonians and Byzantines from the west, Semitic peoples from the south. And over centuries, as empires rose and collapsed, their armies, settlers, and traders mingled, not only in markets and battlefields, but in homes, marriages, and generations. Modern Turkish DNA still carries the fingerprints of these civilizations. The West Eurasian core, derived from these deep, ancient ancestries, remains the strongest component in the Turkish gene pool today. It is not a single thread, but a woven fabric of ancient Anatolians, Mediterranean peoples, and Indo-European migrants. And that's what makes Turkish genetics so compelling. This land wasn't simply invaded, it was layered. And the people who live here are the living embodiment of every civilization that came before. Where others see national boundaries, the genome sees ancient highways. Where some imagine purity, the DNA reveals complexity. And in Anatolia, in the heart of Turkey, that complexity is the legacy. In the 11th century, a new sound rose over the highlands of Anatolia. The clash of hooves, the call of strange tongues, and the echo of something foreign and fearless. The Oghuz Turks had arrived, and with them, the story of modern Turkey would shift forever. They came from the east, born of the vastness between the Caspian and the Altai. Nomads, warriors, empire makers. And yet, as they swept into Anatolia under the banner of the Seljuks, what they conquered was not just land, it was identity. The language changed. The religion changed. Even the names of the rivers and mountains were rewritten in the Turkic tongue. But the blood? The blood mostly stayed the same. Genetically, the impact of this massive cultural wave was surprisingly modest. Not negligible, but far from dominant. Scientific studies consistently reveal a Central Asian genetic layer in modern Turkish DNA, but it's thin. On average, just 9 to 15% of the ancestry in today's Turkish population can be traced back to these Eastern migrants. And here's the paradox. How did a group so small, numerically speaking, leave such a powerful legacy? The answer lies in assimilation, not extermination. The Turks who entered Anatolia didn't wipe out the populations they met. They merged with them, married into them, adopted local customs even as they spread their own. It wasn't the story of a population replaced. It was the story of an identity transformed. The genome tells a tale too subtle for political borders. Y-DNA haplogroups like C, N, and Q, hallmarks of Turkic and Central Asian male ancestry, are present in Turkish men today, but they are vastly outnumbered by lineages native to West Asia and the Mediterranean. What's even more fascinating is the maternal evidence. Mitochondrial DNA analysis shows that women with Central Asian genetic markers appear at a slightly higher frequency than their male counterparts. This suggests something rare in the history of conquests: female migration. Not just armies, but families. Not just generals, but grandmothers. As the Seljuk era gave way to the Ottomans, this process deepened. The Turkic identity expanded to include people whose DNA came from Greece, Armenia, Kurdistan, and the Balkans. Turkification wasn't just about speech or prayer. It was about belonging, a cultural cloak that wrapped around a deeply diverse ancestry. There's no clearer proof of this than the geographic spread of Central Asian ancestry across modern Turkey. It isn't uniform. In some Western provinces, that ancestry reaches around 12%. In the Eastern Highlands, it drops to nearly half that. If the Turks had replaced the population, these patterns would be sharper, more total. Instead, what we see is a gradient, a ripple of admixture slowly moving west to east, woven into the deeper tapestry of Anatolia's genetic heritage. The story of the Turks' arrival is not one of sudden disruption, but slow integration. And therein lies the beauty. Cultures can dominate with swords, but DNA is shaped by time, by touch, by the quiet mathematics of marriage, children, generations. And over centuries, that's exactly what happened here. So while the name Turkey may evoke echoes of the steppe, the faces of its people reflect something far older, far more entangled, the memory of 1,000 ancestors and the endurance of a land that always absorbed more than it rejected. Long before the Turkic banners flew, before empires carved lines into maps, there were farmers. Quiet, determined, revolutionary. They didn't conquer by sword, they conquered by seed. And their legacy lives on not in monuments, but in the very genes of modern people, including the Turks. This is the untold origin of Turkish DNA, a silent inheritance from the first agriculturalists on Earth. Roughly 10,000 years ago, in the heartlands of central Anatolia, small communities began to cultivate wheat, barley, and legumes. What they began in places like Bankaklu and Catalhoyuk would ripple across an entire continent. These Neolithic pioneers didn't just change how humans ate, they changed who humans became. Through ancient genomes excavated from Anatolia, scientists have uncovered a truth often overlooked. The first European farmers were descendants of these Anatolian Neolithics. As they spread into the Balkans and eventually Western Europe, they carried with them the genetic blueprint of the earliest Anatolian cultivators. That genetic wave reshaped Europe, but it never left Anatolia behind. Modern Turks, despite centuries of migrations and admixture, still carry deep signatures of those early farming societies. These aren't just small fragments, they're foundational layers, buried beneath centuries of conquest, religion, and shifting identity. These ancestral echoes are strongest in mitochondrial DNA, the maternal line, reminding us that while empires rose and fell, mothers passed down memories through blood. One of the most astonishing genetic revelations is how closely related early Anatolian farmers are to modern populations in southern Europe. From the sun-kissed hills of Sardinia to the rolling countryside of Tuscany, the genomes whisper of shared origins. But in Turkey, this ancestral connection isn't a relic, it's a living presence. Genetic clustering studies consistently place Turks not near the peoples of the Central Asian steppes, but near southern Europeans. This doesn't negate the Turkic element. It simply reveals the depth of Anatolia's original DNA strata, still visible beneath every later addition. This hidden core, the ancient farmer legacy, helps explain the high frequency of haplogroups like J2 and H in Turkish populations. These lineages don't arrive with horsemen or sultans. They arrive with grain, with clay ovens, with the gentle rhythms of village life. Their endurance is a testament to how deeply rooted these early communities were, how thoroughly they shaped the biological landscape of the land. Even in the age of cutting-edge genome sequencing, the evidence remains poetic. The Turkish people today carry within them the genes of those who first tamed wild crops, who built homes from mud brick, who buried their dead with obsidian tools. They are living proof that civilization doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers through wheat fields. And that whisper never stopped. The Ottoman Empire wasn't just a dominion of lands, it was a dominion of lineages. For 6 centuries, it gathered people like rivers gather rain. folding Balkans, Arabs, Berbers, Caucasians, and Persians into its expanding realm. But what few realize is this. The empire's greatest monument isn't Hagia Sophia or Topkapi Palace. It's the human genome. Modern Turkish DNA is not a static reflection of one migration, one conquest, or one origin. It is a constantly rewritten manuscript, and no chapter shaped it more than the Ottoman age. As the empire expanded from the heart of Anatolia into 3 continents, so too did the circulation of peoples. Entire populations were relocated, resettled, or absorbed, some by policy, others by trade, marriage, or exile. Bosnian Muslims brought their Slavic ancestry. Circassians carried the highland genes of the Caucasus. Arab craftsmen from Damascus and Aleppo mingled with Anatolian merchants. And in this massive exchange, the borders between ethnicities became less about blood and more about belonging. Recent genetic studies confirm this imperial mixing with precision. Genome-wide analyses show that Turks today share notable ancestry segments with Balkan populations like Albanians and Greeks, as well as with Middle Easterners and Caucasian ethnic groups. These are not distant cousins. They are intertwined branches, grafted over centuries of Ottoman movement. But here's what makes it extraordinary. This wasn't just a blend of a few families. It was demographic fusion on a civilizational scale. During the 19th century alone, waves of refugees from collapsing Ottoman territories were resettled into Anatolia, not in small numbers, but in the millions. Crimean Tatars fleeing Russian expansion, Pomaks from Bulgaria, Muslim communities from Crete and Thessaly. Each group brought their own threads, languages, foods, customs, and wove them into the Anatolian fabric. The result? A gene pool that stretches from North Africa to the Balkans, from the Caspian shores to the Nile Delta, compressed into one modern nation. Even within Turkey today, echoes of this diversity persist. Regional patterns reflect Ottoman migration corridors. Western Anatolia leans Balkan in its ancestry. Northeastern Turkey reveals higher Caucasus affinities. Southeastern areas carry more Levantine and Mesopotamian threads. But the boundaries are soft, the distinctions blurred, because the Ottoman project, intentional or not, was one of human interweaving, not isolation. And this genetic quilt did more than preserve heritage. It absorbed and transformed it. Lineages once foreign became Turkish through culture, through generations, through everyday life. This isn't just admixture. It's alchemy, where distinct ancestries were melted down into something new. In genetic studies, this Ottoman legacy emerges as a unique signal, a higher-than-expected heterogeneity in Turkish genomes, and a wide distribution of haplogroups that defy simple regional labeling. No single influence dominates. Instead, you find balance, a living archive of empire in every strand of DNA. For centuries, scribes recorded the decrees of sultans. But the truest record of the empire is inside the people, not carved in stone, but encoded in cells. Inside the genome of a Turkish individual, there are secrets that exist nowhere else on Earth. Not in Europe, not in the Middle East, not in Central Asia. Only here, in this land once called Anatolia. A vast catalog of rare and private mutations lies hidden, waiting to be read like an ancient manuscript written in code. This isn't poetic speculation. It's scientific revelation. In 2021, a groundbreaking study sequenced the genomes of over 3,000 Turkish individuals. The results stunned the genetic world. Nearly half of the rarest variants found in these sequences had never been seen in any other population. Not in Europe, not in Africa, not even among regional neighbors. These weren't just uncommon traits. They were exclusive. A population-scale signature, forged through millennia of isolation, admixture, and cultural evolution. This genetic archive is now known as the Turkish variome, a term that doesn't just describe variation, but distinction. Researchers found over 9.9 million novel genetic variants, of which more than 8 million were entirely private to Turks. Some of them were tied to ancient genes of immunity, others to pigmentation, neurological pathways, or even rare disease resistance. And among them were high-confidence loss-of-function variants, genetic switches turned off in ways scientists had never documented elsewhere. One such discovery included a gene mutation homologous to Denisovan ancestry. Yes, the same mysterious hominins that once walked Siberia and Southeast Asia. The presence of such a variant in Turkish genomes suggests a deep ancestral thread running far beyond recent history, perhaps even into Paleolithic memory. But this isn't just about ancient echoes. The variome also contains 704 rare homozygous mutations that could only emerge through centuries of demographic layering and, in some cases, endogamy. These mutations are crucial for medical science, helping identify why certain hereditary disorders appear more frequently in Turkish communities and offering rare windows into gene function that remain invisible in other populations. From a global perspective, Turkey now stands as one of the most genetically informative countries in Eurasia, not because its DNA conforms to expectations, but because it doesn't. Its diversity is not chaotic, it's patterned, and that pattern tells a story no other nation carries. Even genome-wide association studies are being reshaped by these findings. Medical researchers now have to recalibrate their databases when including Turkish subjects because so many SNPs, single nucleotide polymorphisms, in Turks differ significantly from those of their European or Middle Eastern neighbors. This includes variants related to cholesterol regulation, inflammatory response, and even sensory traits like hair color and taste receptors. In one particularly striking example, Turkish genomes showed a nearly 90% prevalence of a cholesterol-linked SNP that appears in less than 10% of Africans and only moderately across the rest of Eurasia. This isn't trivia. It's the kind of finding that rewrites how we understand adaptation, diet, and regional evolution. But perhaps the most powerful revelation is this. For all the stories told of Turkish history, the conquests, the migrations, the rise and fall of dynasties, the variome offers a narrative untouched by politics or language, a silent, immutable record of what truly made this population unique. This is not just a genetic archive. It is a living museum, and it exists in every cell of a Turkish child, every elder, every heartbeat carrying the weight of unknown ancestors. Behind every family name, every accent, every tradition, there is a haplogroup, a code passed down from parent to child, generation after generation, untouched by memory, but faithful to origin. In Turkey, these codes reveal something astonishing, a people whose very biology defies borders. Unlike the simplistic narrative of a single ancestral source, the Turkish haplogroup landscape is an intricate web, woven from lineages that began in deserts, steppes, mountains, and Mediterranean coasts. Each haplogroup is a thread, and together, they stitch the genetic fingerprint of a nation born from crossroads. Let's begin with the paternal story, the Y chromosome. In Turkish men, the most common haplogroup is J2A, accounting for nearly 1 in 5 lineages. This marker traces back to the first agricultural societies of the Fertile Crescent, ancestors who planted grain long before they built kingdoms. It's also prominent in the Caucasus, Greece, and southern Italy, hinting at deep regional continuity across time. Closely following is R1b, a lineage often linked to Western Europe and the Bronze Age expansions across the continent. Its presence in Turkey doesn't imply foreign imposition. Rather, it reflects the diffusion of steppe-related ancestry through ancient Indo-European migrations that didn't stop at the Bosphorus. Then there's R1a, more common in Eastern and Northeastern Europe, but also present in Anatolia, a quiet reminder of shared roots with Slavic and Indo-Iranian populations. This diversity within the R haplogroup family alone underscores the genetic dialogue between West and East. But the Turkish Y-DNA spectrum doesn't end in Europe. Haplogroups like G2, E1b, and J1 tell their own stories, from the Caucasus to North Africa and Arabia. Each was carried here not by chance, but by human journeys, merchants, settlers, soldiers, refugees, moving through Anatolia over millennia. These weren't abrupt events. They were slow, persistent rivers of ancestry that flowed into the heart of the land. And then the Eastern Echo. Although they represent a smaller proportion, haplogroups like C, Q, O, and N, markers of Central and East Asian origin, are the genetic whispers of the Turkic migrations. Not dominant but unmistakable. A signature left by the Oghuz tribes and others who journeyed westward, interweaving their bloodlines with the people of Anatolia. These haplogroups aren't widespread, but their presence is enough to shift the genetic compass east, without overpowering the core. On the maternal side, the story deepens. Mitochondrial DNA, passed from mother to child, reveals a population shaped even more strongly by West Eurasian heritage. Haplogroups H, U, and T dominate the Turkish maternal lineage, all widely distributed across Europe and Western Asia. These maternal lines connect Turkish women to Neolithic farmers, ancient seafarers, and Bronze Age societies that stretched from the Levant to the Danube. And still, the rare presence of East Eurasian mDNA, haplogroups like D and G, remind us that some Central Asian women traveled with the Turkic migrations, embedding their legacy quietly, enduringly. What sets Turkey apart is not the presence of any one haplogroup, but the balance among many. It's the only place where North African E clades can coexist with European R1b, Caucasian G2a, and Central Asian Q in meaningful frequencies, all in a single population, unified by geography, but diversified by history. This isn't a scattered mosaic, it's a symphony, a genetic arrangement where no instrument plays alone. Every lineage, whether dominant or marginal, contributes to the melody. And in the end, it tells us this. Turkish identity was never about purity. It was always about connection. And the haplogroups, silent, unbroken, and incorruptible, have carried that truth across the ages. Not all stories written in our DNA are about triumph. Some are warnings. Others are whispers from the past, inherited burdens, carried silently through generations. In Turkey, the genome doesn't just speak of diversity. It reveals scars, patterns of inheritance shaped by tradition, by isolation, and by thousands of years of shared ancestry. And yet, in those same scars lies unmatched genetic insight. Begin with a name unfamiliar to most, familial Mediterranean fever, or FMF. A relentless inflammatory condition, often striking without warning, burning through the joints and abdomen. In Turkey, it affects 1 in every 1,000 people. But the real signal is deeper. Nearly 20% of Turks carry a mutation in the MEFV gene, the silent seed of the disease. This isn't random. It's the consequence of ancient bottlenecks, moments in history where populations were small, isolated, and reshaped by selective pressures. FMF mutations are especially common in groups who have shared geography and blood for centuries. Armenians, Jews, Arabs, and Turks. They are not markers of weakness, but traces of resilience, etched into DNA by survival through centuries of disease, famine, and war. Another shadow in the genome is Behçet's disease, an aggressive autoimmune disorder that inflames blood vessels and blurs the line between the immune system and self-destruction. And no nation bears its weight more than Turkey. Turkish people have the highest known prevalence of Behçet's disease in the world. Why? One answer: the HLA-B*51 allele. Roughly 1 in 4 healthy Turks carry this gene variant, an astronomical frequency compared to global averages. Its origin is ancient. Some researchers believe it once provided protection against viral plagues in the deep past. A defensive trait that once saved lives, now turned against the body in silence. But these conditions don't exist in a vacuum. Turkey's population also shows high rates of consanguinity, marriages between cousins or close relatives, a practice that, while declining, remains present in some regions. This social custom has a genetic price: longer stretches of homozygosity, where both copies of a gene are identical due to shared ancestry. These runs increase the chance that recessive diseases manifest. Rare disorders that remain hidden in most populations become visible here, sometimes tragically so. Yet within that risk lies a powerful opportunity. Because of these genetic patterns, Turkish genomes have become crucial to medical discovery. The presence of homozygous loss-of-function mutations, where both versions of a gene stop working, allows researchers to understand what happens when human biology is pushed to its edge. Turkish genetics, therefore, are not only unique, they're instructive. In one sweeping study, over 700 rare loss-of-function mutations were discovered in Turkish individuals, many in genes never before linked to disease. These weren't just medical anomalies. They were keys to unlocking how certain systems in the body function or fail. And the impact of this? Global. From neurology to immunology, Researchers across continents now look to Turkey's variome as a guide. What was once seen as a health burden is being reframed as scientific wealth, a window into human biology that few other populations can provide. Because sometimes, in the places where the genome breaks, we discover how the human body works best. Some landscapes shape rivers, others shape stories. But Anatolia, the land at the heart of Turkey, shaped people. Not just who they became, but who they were allowed to be. This isn't a country drawn by accident. It is a genetic funnel, a place where humanity, over tens of thousands of years, has passed through, paused, and left its mark. Every valley here has held a traveler. Every mountain range has split bloodlines, only to merge them again in the plains below. Turkey's extraordinary genetic diversity is not a mystery when seen through its geography. It is the inevitable result of where it stands. To the west, the Balkans, open channels for Roman legions, Slavic migrations, and later, Ottoman resettlements. To the northeast, the Caucasus, a region dense with ethnic enclaves and ancient highland cultures, each carrying distinct genes across mountain corridors. To the southeast, Mesopotamia, the birthplace of cities and writing, where Semitic and Sumerian cultures once flourished. And to the center, the Anatolian Plateau, the stage where all of them collided. The roads into Anatolia were never closed. They were highways long before the first road was built. From early foragers and Neolithic farmers to Byzantine merchants and Arab scholars, waves of people moved across this land, not as invaders, but as participants in a long, unfinished exchange. And that movement shaped biology as deeply as it shaped language. Genetic studies reveal gradients, not walls, within Turkey. Western provinces lean genetically toward southern Europe. Eastern Anatolia shows stronger ties to the Caucasus and the Iranian plateau. Southeastern regions carry signatures that echo the Levant and ancient Mesopotamian communities. But these aren't hard divides. They are fades, subtle transitions from one ancestral palette to another. No region in Turkey is genetically isolated. Even the most remote mountain villages bear traces of ancient migrations. Even the most urban centers carry imprints of steppe warriors, Bronze Age traders, and Silk Road pilgrims. And then there's the internal geography. Turkey's topography is a masterclass in complexity. Jagged ranges like the Taurus and Pontic Mountains created microregions where certain communities remained semi-isolated for generations, preserving local genetic signatures: Armenian, Laz, Zaza, Kurdish, Greek. Meanwhile, the coastal zones, Izmir, Mersin, Trabzon, open constantly to Mediterranean and Black Sea contact, allowing more genetic flow and foreign admixture than many interior zones. In essence, geography didn't just allow for diversity, it demanded it. A land with so many natural corridors must become a cradle of genetic fusion, a country where East met West, not once, but continuously, could never remain homogeneous. And Turkey never did. That's why Turkish DNA today does not resemble a single ancestral source. It's not the echo of a lone civilization. It is the living signature of countless populations, overlapping, interweaving, sometimes vanishing, sometimes surviving. What makes Turkey unique isn't just what happened here. It's where it happened. The genes don't lie. This land was designed by nature itself to gather stories in blood. What does it mean to belong? Is it the language you speak? The anthem you sing? The soil beneath your feet? Or is it something quieter, buried deep in your blood, beyond memory, beyond choice? For centuries, identity has been shaped by stories we tell ourselves. But ancestry, that's the story written without permission. The modern Turkish identity is anchored in Turkic heritage, in the steppe legacy of the Oghuz, in the rise of the Seljuks, and the grandeur of the Ottomans. The language is Turkic. The cultural architecture, unmistakably Islamic and imperial. The symbolism, rooted in a proud Eastern past. But the genome doesn't salute flags. It doesn't recite national myths. It simply preserves what happened, who mixed with whom, who stayed, who left, who lived long enough to pass their code forward. And here lies the dissonance. Despite the dominant Turkic identity, the overwhelming majority of Turkish genetic ancestry comes not from Central Asia, but from West Eurasia, from local Anatolian farmers, from Balkan migrants, from ancient Mediterranean populations, whose names have long vanished from maps. Genetically, Turks today share more with Southern Europeans, Italians, Greeks, even some Iberians, than they do with most Central Asian populations. The connection to the steppe exists, but as a minor note in a much older, deeper symphony. This isn't a contradiction. It's a revelation, because identity was never meant to be a reflection of ancestry. It's a construction, built over time by language, religion, politics, and memory. The genes might whisper the truth of origins, but the culture sings the song of belonging. And in Turkey, those two things walk side by side, not always in agreement, but never in denial. The myth of genetic purity, long used to justify borders and superiority, disintegrates under the weight of Turkey's real history. This land has always been a stage for mixing. The genome proves it. There's no pure blood here, only deeply entangled blood, shaped by thousands of years of movement, marriage, empire, resistance, and reinvention. And that's what makes Turkish identity so powerful. It doesn't rely on being ancient, or unmixed, or authentic in some mythical sense. Its strength lies in its complexity, its ability to hold contradictions, to unify 100 histories into one shared present. So ask yourself, does identity begin with blood or with belief? Because in the case of Turkey, the answer may be both, but never just one.